They are protesting on Nigeria's Democracy Day, a day set aside to celebrate the progress made in Nigeria's longest democratic rule in history since 1999. Police fired gunshots into the air and tear gas into the crowds in order to disperse the protesters. The demonstrators were holding placards and chanted, "Buhari must go." Protesters are calling for an end to mass kidnappings for ransom in the northwest, a decade-long attacks by Boko Haram in the northeast. Protesters are also calling for better governance and better livelihood.
We cannot continue like this. We want to stop us not to protest for our rights. We must protest for our rights. This is our rights. The revolution must start from today. So all this killing must stop. All this bad government must stop. Buhari, we don't need you again. There is problem in this country. So now you don't cause divide in this country. And this nonsense must stop. We are in our country. We can do anyhow. This is our country. Buhari must go. Buhari must leave this country.
The federal government and the rulership of Nigeria is so dumb that they have forgotten the economical value of Twitter. Because of your tweet that was deleted, you decided to ban Twitter. For what? This is an attitude of a non-educated military man.
Harsh crackdown on protesters in Lagos last October has set the country on edge and led to demands for greater action to combat insecurity.
Meanwhile, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has admitted that he has failed to end insecurity in the country. He says the fight against militants had unintentionally spread violence. Buhari promised to end the violence when he was elected back in 2015. In his address marking Democracy Day on Saturday, President Buhari said the past 2 years had seen challenges that would have destroyed other nations. Referring to the attacks and kidnappings that have spread to northwest and central Nigeria, he said some Nigerian criminals have taken advantage of a difficult situation. The president said he would do everything in his power to ensure security. He said the fight against militants in the north had had the unintended consequence of spreading violence to other areas. Buhari extended his heartfelt condolences to families of victims. The Boko Haram Islamist group, which began its insurgency in 2009, has stepped up attacks in recent months. For more in this story, we're now joined by Femi Falana, a Nigerian lawyer and human rights activist from Abuja in Nigeria. Femi, very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Good evening. I'm actually in Lagos.
Okay, I do beg your pardon. Thank you so much for clarifying that. What do you make of President Buhari's admission that he has failed to end insecurity in the country? Does the statement not embolden the insurgent group, Boko Haram?
Well, no doubt the admission by the government in the face of worsening security situation in the country, that the government is overwhelmed, is clearly disturbing, because this is certainly going to embolden the insurgents to unleash further attacks on Nigerians. And apart from the insurgents, we also have bandits attacking and kidnapping school children. Right now, over 150 pupils, school pupils, are in the custody of unknown bandits. Of course, there is general insecurity in the country, massive unemployment, and young people are angry that the government has banned Twitter, which they see as many Nigerians, about 40 million Nigerians are subscribers to Twitter. And they feel this is a violation of their freedom of expression. Of course, Nigerians fought for democracy, fought against colonialism, fought against military dictatorship, and now to have democracy, where the rights of people are not respected. I mean, this is the basis of the protest of today. And there's a very popular protest, not just in Lagos and Abuja, in Calabar, in Ibadan, in Ondo, Akure, in Oshogbo, and many other places today. Many people have been arrested. We've been able to secure the release of most of them. We just have a few left. And we hope, latest Tuesday, maybe the government may want to take them to court. But they have committed no offense, because under the law, protesters have the right to express themselves, through peaceful rallies, and that was what happened today. Furthermore, under the Police Act of 2020, the government has a duty to direct the police to protect demonstrators. So there was no basis to have shot tear gas or disperse the crowd violently, as witnessed in many cities today.
Now, Femi, President Buhari promised to end the violence when he was elected back in 2015. What do you think was behind his failure?
Well, President Buhari promised to end insurgency, promised to fight corruption to a standstill, promised to fix the economy. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to address it because he has allowed, the regime has allowed imperialist forces, imperialist institutions, particularly the IMF and World Bank, to take over the economy of Nigeria. And so we are witnessing unprecedented devaluation of the national currency, the naira, and that has led to possible inflation and mounting poverty in the country. This is what has happened by allowing foreign interests to take over the economy. This is the basis of the crisis. You are running a peripheral capitalist system that has continued to promote poverty, unemployment, disenchantment, and loss of confidence in the country by young people and majority of our citizens.
Well, am I correct to suggest that an over-reliance on military strategy to confront Boko Haram is at the heart of the state's inability to deal with the threat?
Well, not quite. I think what has happened, despite the funding, the money that has been made available by the government to combat terrorism, to combat banditry, to combat armed robbery, kidnapping and other violent crimes, it has been established that you have had a coterie of generals who had looted the treasury, or rather cornered the funds. And so this has led to problems. But, the National Assembly again, is appropriating fresh funds to buy equipment so that the war against insurgents or the war on terror, can take another dimension. But this has been the problem. A lot of, lack of commitment on the part of some of the military chiefs, have been responsible, for the loss of the war, as it were. And this has emboldened the terrorists, to unleash mayhem on the country.
In his Democracy Day address, President Buhari added that some Nigerian criminals have taken advantage of a very difficult situation. Just how true is this assertion?
Well, it's the business of the government to identify the criminals and deal with them. The government cannot, the president cannot wear the gap of a critic. He has to work in step by dealing with criminals in the country. You must round them up. You must put a system in place that can punish criminal elements who are arrested. They must be taken to court and prosecuted.
Okay, now today also saw countrywide protests in Nigeria calling for an end to bad governance, insecurity and the recent Twitter ban, amongst other issues. Can you elaborate on the issues behind these protests?
Well, the protest has coincided, with the celebration of Democracy Day. Today marks another anniversary of the criminal annulment of a fair and free election. In fact, the fairest and the freest election ever conducted in Nigeria on June 12, 1993. The results were cancelled by a military dictator, a former military dictator, General Ibrahim Babangida. And since then, Nigerians have continued to refer to that day as a watershed in the history of Nigeria. The government, a couple of years ago, was compelled to set aside today as a Democracy Day. And so many people in the country took advantage of today to review the democratic journey and came to the conclusion that the country is falling back, and that dictatorship is rearing its ugly head in the country. And for this reason, Nigerians decided to come out today to protest against the restriction of freedom, to protest against lack of expansion of the democratic space, and of course to protest against injustice, social injustice, against unemployment, against poverty, and against violation of the freedom of expression through the suspension of Twitter.
And speaking of bad governance, I understand that corruption is one thing that may be holding the military back in terms of defeating Boko Haram, because the funds that have been earmarked for defeating this insurgent group end up lining officials' pockets. So is this true, or is it simply because the government lacks capacity to defeat these insurgent groups?
Well, it is true in the sense that some of the military chiefs, particularly the National Security Advisor, General Monguno, has come out publicly to say that the money earmarked for acquisition of arms and ammunition, has been mismanaged, and therefore there are problems. And I personally defend quite a number of soldiers who were sacrificed and jailed or even sentenced to death, even though we're able to get the government to commit their sentencing. When we made it clear to the authorities that the money earmarked for buying weapons disappeared, and these soldiers were simply asking for weapons to fight. They didn't desert, the war front. They were asking for weapons to fight because the terrorists, are more armed, are more equipped, are more motivated. And so these are the issues being addressed by Nigerians, and the government is being challenged to address the problem of corruption, to address lack of motivation of the troops, and to address the corrupt practices, associated with the war on terror.
And worryingly, we understand that some Nigerians are actually forging links with some of the militants, which underscores the fear that Boko Haram's influence is indeed spreading.
Well, that is not a very strong point, because the duty of the government and the promise made by the president as a former general, is to combat terrorism frontally, and that is what Nigerians expect. Whoever is identified to be funding or encouraging the terrorists, has to be arrested and prosecuted. That's what Nigerians expect, and that is the least that can be expected on the part of the government. So the government cannot be allowed to launch verbal attacks on those who may be funding or supporting terrorism. The duty of the security forces is to identify them and get them arrested and prosecuted.
Well, Femi, today marks 20 years since Nigeria first moved to civilian rule. How would you assess the last 20 years? And would you say that civilian rule is close to collapse? I mean, reportedly, court workers, for example, have been on strike for months now, thus affecting justice and human rights processes.
Well, the system is not about to collapse. Clearly, there are challenges. And I can assure you, Nigerians are prepared to take advantage of the system to effect a change through democratic means. I mean, Nigerians are opposed to military rule in any shape or form. And that is why Nigerians are making this demand. That's why Nigerians are protesting, to compel the government to address the problems confronting our people.
All right, Femi, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
There is a Femi Falana, a Nigerian lawyer and human rights activist from Lagos in Nigeria.